Hello learners, welcome to the session on understanding the concept of governance and a brief introduction to governance in the Indian context. In this course on glimpses of Indian social legislation and social welfare, we saw the basic views on Indian social structure in general and rural society in particular. To understand the legislation in the Indian context, we traced its genesis from the British era. Then an overview of the Indian Constitution, its preamble, directive principles, fundamental rights and duties, and information on judicial activism and public interest litigation were dealt with. Before going into the modules on social legislation for the people of India and the various sections of the society, we can understand what governance is, how it is different from government, what its forms are, what governance is in the Indian context, what good governance is, etc. So, in this module, we will be looking into the explanation of the concepts of government and governance and the difference between them, types or forms of governance, the significance of good governance, governance in the Indian context. So, now we can see the concepts of government and governance. Dear friends, the concepts of government and governance can be well understood with the basic view of the concept of the state. A state is a political institution with sovereign jurisdiction within defined territorial borders and exercises authority through a group or set of permanent institutions. The state possesses the elements like people, territory, government and sovereignty. Typically, a state has a government, but as there are far more governments than states, a state is more than just a government. Originating in early modern Europe, the state is a contemporary political construction that has been simulated in other parts of the world. If we try to talk about the concept of government as an institution, it can be felt before that of the state. A government is a person or group of persons who rule or govern or administer a political community or a state. The existence of the public is a basic need for the government to come into being. When people agree voluntarily or involuntarily to the authority of some person or persons to handle issues of public interest, then there is the government. The matters of people's concern include the provision of non-excludable goods, the administration of justice and defense against external enemies, etc. Before the establishment of the state, the government managed the affairs of less distinct or well-defined publics rather than looking out for the interests of the corporate organization. When the state came into existence, the government became the official administrative component of a corporate entity. The entity that exercises the power and authority is termed as government. Power and authority are two concepts at times used synonymously, but power denotes the ability to influence others' behaviors, whereas authority is a legitimate power and it can also impact the behavior of others. Authority is based on the duty to obey in preference to any form of force or manipulation. Weber classified three types of authority based on the way people obey. In traditional authority, obedience is ingrained in history. In charismatic authority, the personality is the basis, and in the rational legal authority, the bureaucratic mechanism or set of impersonal rules is the source of obedience. Government is the sphere of political power. Government is a major constituent of state and it acts as an instrument to accomplish the goals and the objectives of the state. The government has been entrusted with wide-ranging functions. The political apparatus of government includes institution of parliament or Congress and civil service officials. Here in government, there will be a given territory to rule whose authority is backed by a legal system that can be in tune with Weber's rational legal authority. The concepts of government and governance are often used interchangeably, but both are not synonymous. The concept of governance was first used by Harold Cleveland in the late 1970s. He explained the concepts as what the people want is less government and more governance. Rosnow identifies the main difference between government and governance as government rules and controls and governance orchestrates and manages. Here, to rule with regard to government means to be the sole authority, relying on force, whereas governance means that everyone, whether it is formal or informal organization, has a part to play in moving the society forward. Governance is a broader term than government. In its widest sense, governance refers to the various ways in which social life is coordinated. Government can therefore be seen as one of the institutions in governance. It is possible to have governance without government. Haywood in 1997 states, governance has several actors. Among them, the government is one of the significant, and depending on the needs of the administration, the actors of the governance vary. Like landlords, cooperative societies, NGOs, local leaders, etc., we see in the rural areas. Plumte and Graham also illustrate the difference between governance and government. Government is an organizational setting that operationalizes the basic principles of governance. Government can rarely be described as a process. It is either seen as an institution or a set of organizations like cabinet, government offices, state administration, etc. It is also a term broadly describing the forms, regimes and models of governing and representation. Governance involves the interaction among structures, processes and traditions that determine how power is exercised, how decisions are taken and how citizens or other stakeholders have their say. Fundamentally, it is about power relationships and accountability, who has influence, who decides and how decision makers are held accountable. It is more like an art of steering societies and organizations and conflict solving. Now we can see the concept of governance. We talk about the term governance in detail in this part. Governance as a term finds its roots in various languages. For instance, from the etymological point of view, the Greek word kuberman means to steer, the Latin word kubernare means to steer or rule, and govern in Middle English means to control, influence or regulate a person, action or course of events, or to conduct the policy actions and affairs of a state, organization or people with authority. Governance as an action has two important activities. They are the act of governing and being governed. Governing is the act of entrusting a few individuals to create laws, set order and define conduct of the remaining masses. The term governance was popular at the end of the Cold War. Petre Vermetel, in his work on governance, defining the concept, he explained that nowadays governance has become a fashionable word in which we try to describe a whole host of approaches and techniques for improving coordination among the different levels of society. When he tries to provide the nearest synonym for governance, he points out that it is coordination based on partnership and dialogue. Governance is viewed as a construct and can take meaning from the area of interest where it is constructed. Its meaning transfer contextually in social science discipline. The concept is flexible and covers many problems, but it is also very unclear and vague. To explain what governance is could seem quite easy, although there is a lot of disagreement among social scientists about the meaning of the word. The first official usage of the contemporary notion of governance was put forth in 1989 by the World Bank. It was the first international organization to use the term governance and defined it in the following words: how power is exercised in the management of a country's economic, social resources by government. Governance in general has three distinct aspects: the form of political regime, which consists of parliamentarian or presidential, military or civilian or authoritarian or democratic form of it; the process by which authority is exercised in the management of country's economic and social resources; and the third one is the capacity of governments to design, formulate and implement policies and in general to discharge governmental functions. The term usually describes conditions in a country as a whole. United Nations Development Programme (UNDP) views governance as the exercise of economic, political and administrative authority to manage a country's affairs at all levels and how states promote social cohesion, integration and ensure the well-being of their populations. It embraces all methods used to distribute power and manage public resources and the organizations that shape government and the execution of policy. It encompasses the mechanisms, process and institutions through which citizens and groups articulate their interests, exercise their legal rights, meet their obligations and resolve their differences. United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization (UNESCO) defines governance as a process whereby citizens' needs and interests are articulated for the positive social and economic development of the entire society and in the light of a perceived common good. Governance means more than government. It refers to a political process that encompasses the whole society and contributes to the making of citizens, active contributors to the social contract that binds them together. This sense of political efficacy is one of the indicators of democratic governance. According to Rhodes, the concept of governance is in social sciences currently used for at least 7 different meanings based on its application. We can see it one by one. The first one is the minimal state. Governance redefines the extent and the form of public intervention, the use of markets and quasi-markets to deliver public services. The second one is corporate governance, which relates to the governing of public and private enterprises, that is, the system by which organizations are directed and controlled. The third one is new public management, shortly known as NPM. The new public management aims at making public administration market based, committed to the 3 prime goals of efficiency, economy and effectiveness, which is shortly known as 3 E's. NPM has emerged as a major manifestation of the competition state approach. New public management had 2 meanings. They are managerialism and new institutional economics. The next one is good governance. Good governance is an attempt to widen the scope of public administration by going beyond formal government. It is a broad reform strategy to make the government more open, responsive, accountable and democratic, regulate the private sector and strengthen the institution of civil society. It is the qualitative dimension of governance. This we can discuss in detail in the later part of this session. New international order is the next point. It is a global governance. The next one is social cybernetic system. The social cybernetic approach views governance as the result of interactive social and political forms of governing. The approach highlights the limits of governing by a central actor and claims there is no longer a single sovereign authority. The next one is self-organized networks. It sees governance as a broader term than government, with services provided by a combination of government, the private sector and the voluntary agencies. Governance is about managing networks. For example, the British government creates agencies, bypasses local government, uses special purpose bodies to deliver services and encourages public-private partnerships. So, networks become increasingly prominent among British governing structures. This model is driven by networks and collaborative government rather than hierarchies. It lays stress on horizontal linkages among the three actors, that is the state, market and civil society. Integrated networks resist government steering, develop their policies and mold their environments. After going through several meanings and explanations on governance, now we can try to understand the attributes of the concept of governance and its several interpretations. Governance is used in several contexts. According to Rhodes, the shared characteristics of governance are interdependence between organizations. Governance is broader than government. Yes, we are seeing it again and again, covering non-state actors. Changing the boundaries of the state meant the boundaries between public, private and voluntary sectors became shifting and opaque. The second one is continuing interaction between network members caused by the need to exchange resources and negotiate shared purposes. The third one is game-like interactions rooted in the trust and regulated by rules of the game negotiated and agreed by network participants. The fourth one is a significant degree of autonomy for the state. Networks are not accountable to the state, they are self-organizing. Although the state does not occupy a privileged sovereign position, it can indirectly and imperfectly steer the networks. In recent times, Chakrabarti and Bhattacharya explained governance as follows. Governance is the structure of political institutions, a shift from a bureaucratic state to hollow state or third party government. A governance is a market based approach to government. Governance is the development of social capital, civil society and high levels of citizen participation. It is also the work of empowered, muscular and risk-taking entrepreneurs. Tony Blair's third way in the UK, that is United Kingdom. A political packaging of the latest ideas of new public management, that is NPM. An attempt to renew the civil society. Then the last but not the least, governance is globalization and rationalization. Now we can move on to the types and or the forms of governance. There are various forms of governance, among which more important are political, economic and social governance. Let us start with political governance. The nation states capacity to govern is becoming limited because of the global political and economic shifts. Some political scientists like Rhodes, Chakrabarti felt that this may be due to hollowing out of the state. As a result, authority has shifted outward to multinational corporations to transfer capital and other resources from one investment location to another, to international financial markets and supranational organizations like the European Union or the World Bank. Additionally, power has percolated to cities and regions at the subnational level. The significance of new tactics based on enabling, regulation and informal influence has increased. This does not, however, imply that the role of the state is diminishing. Along with new forms of governance, hierarchical institutional channels of control continued. Now, we can see what is economic governance. In the governance literature, the core idea is that networks, markets and hierarchies create different ways to coordinate various forms and modes of governance, such as those based on markets, hierarchies and networks will coexist in different countries. However, networks are becoming more important. Eliminating market falsification, establishing suitable service standards, guaranteeing level playing fields and fair competition among participants and safeguarding the interests of all relevant key stakeholders are all necessary for economic governance. The next form of governance is social governance. Another way to analyze governance is to acknowledge the dynamic changes, diversity and complexity of society. The goal of governance in our societies might be defined as addressing both the potential and the challenges presented by complex, diverse and fragmented communities. Due to complexity, dynamism and diversity, the nation state's external autonomy is decreasing and its internal authority over social subsystem is also diminishing. Modern society requires new types of interactive government, since its governing is primarily a process of coordinating and influencing social, political and administrative interactions. The goal of interactive governance is to balance societal interests and establish the boundaries and potential for self-organization of social actors and systems. Now, we can see the significance of good governance. After the World Bank popularized the term good governance, this application of governance gained popularity. The exercise of political power to manage a nation's affairs is how the World Bank defines governance. The bank saw the need for good governance as a complement to effective economic policies and as a means of establishing and maintaining an environment that promotes robust and equitable development. Good governance aims to go beyond formal government and broaden the purview of public administration. To put it differently, it is a comprehensive reform plan that aims to build strong civil society institutions, regulate the private sector and make government more transparent, responsive, accountable and democratic. It embodies the qualitative aspect of governance by fusing the accountability concerns of governance with the efficiency concern of public administration. It underlines the basic features of governance, good governance. Now, we can see it one by one. Voice and accountability, which includes civil liberties and political stability. Effectiveness of the government, which includes the quality of policy making and public service delivery. The quality of regulatory framework. The rule of law, which includes protection of property rights. Then we have independence of judiciary, and the last one is curbs on corruption. The good governance agenda advocates for the freedom of information, a strong legal system and efficient administration to help underprivileged sections claim their equality. However, these initiatives have been most successful when supported by strong political mobilization through social movements or political parties with clear mission. Good governance entails fostering positive outcomes in all three sectors. The sectors mentioned are government, civil society and the corporate world, including the transnational corporations. It is triaced with trust, a commitment by the people, for the people and a social contract for the greatest good, reflecting the collective conscience of the community. The basic features of good governance as conceptualized by policy makers, researchers and international agencies can be summarized by the word SMART, S-M-A-R-T, where each letter represents a prerequisite for good governance. In SMART, S stands for simple, M stands for moral, A stands for accountable, R stands for responsive and T stands for transparent. In other words, it highlights the qualitative dimension of governance rather than merely enhancing governance quality. Now, we can move on to the next part of our deliberation, that is governance in Indian context. To promote social, political and economic growth, the Indian governance framework emphasizes the role of both state and non-state actors. The state actors, for the welfare of the people, the governance is governed by. To start with, we have our constitutional supremacy. The Constitution provides the foundational basis for governance by explaining the powers, functions and jurisdictional boundaries of the state. The legislature, executive and judiciary are its components that specify the rights, responsibilities and duties of its citizen. The second framework we have is parliamentary system. It is a complex and composite institution which plays a pivotal role in the representative democracy with legislations, bills, debates, question hours like live proceedings of the business conducted, etc. Indian Parliament includes the President, Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha is the House of People, whereas Rajya Sabha is Council of States. Then we have the political executive. So, to execute the governance activities, we have Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. Then we have the administrative executive in the structure. The state actor of the administrative executive comprises of civil service, field agencies and authorities, armed forces, etc. Using the accountability instruments listed below, politics and administration can interact. So, we have to start with is freedom of information. For people to have access to government documents, accounts, letters of appointments, orders, etc. to its citizens, the right to information, that is the RTA Act, a major legislation was enacted in 2005. Then we have the Citizens Charter. The implementation of Citizens Charter in 2002 was a response to the transformation of government to citizen, that is G2C interface. At the apex level, the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances DARPG looks after the task of formulation and implementation of Citizens Charter. Then we have the public hearings. A public hearing encourages the process of interaction between the people and the concerned stakeholders in a participatory manner. This is specific to the general public who are likely to be affected by the project, that is particularly the government projects like mining, industrial, infrastructural, thermal power, nuclear power and hydropower projects. To acquire environmental clearance for any project, a public hearing must be held in accordance with the provisions of the Environment Impact Assessment that is being enacted in 2006. Then we have this social audit which also work for the governance of the people, that is that too for the good governance. The MGNREA Act of 2005 included social audit as an empowerment tool in India. Through the social audit mechanism, citizens can actively engage in the governance process and monitor any disparities between the distribution of funds and their actual use. Now, we can see the next part of it, that is the state and the local governance. The next state actor in the governance process is the state and the local level. State level governance. The chief minister is the head of the state government. The head will delegate their responsibility as a communication channel between the governor, state legislative assembly, central government administration and citizens. Then we have the local level governance. The important local level governance was made effective by the enactment of 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and known as the Panchayat Raj Act. This act helps to address the challenges of governance at the local level and the creation of municipalities and panchayats. Now, we can see the next thing, that is the judiciary. The institution of judiciary is respected and is entrusted with the power to protect the rights and freedoms of the people. It should be mentioned that modern courts offer more new safeguards against representative institutions. These protections have been constituted by the court due to the changing social, economic and political context. The judiciary occupies a unique position within the governing matrix of power. Now, learners, we can have a look at the operational framework of non-state actors for the people is done. It is governed by the market. A paradigm shift in the Indian setting was brought about by the implementation of economic reforms in 1991. The state deliberately withdrew from development initiatives requiring substantial financial and technical resources through public-private partnership, contracting out, divesting, deregulation, leasing, greenfield projects and other methods. It came to terms with working on projects with the private sector in important areas like transportation and infrastructure. The another non-state actor is civil society. It plays a prime role in governance throughout the world. With the evolution of the paradigm from government to governance, civil society in India was perceived in two ways by the learned people. First, with regard to their role in social movements which made the government responsive to citizens' aspirations. The second one is, in a sense, civil society organizations have made a name for themselves in the democratic arena by bringing the constitutional ideals to life. The inputs of the public, particularly the civil society, to identify the governance challenges in specific areas were invited by the Planning Commission for the first time during the 12th 5-year plan, that is the period between 2012 to 2017. Dear students, with this introduction on Indian governance, we can move on to the upcoming modules where we will see the detailed aspects of the governance initiative in India. To summarize, in this model, we started with the analysis of the concept of governance, where we dealt with the concept of state, government and how they are related to power and authority. Then we saw the etymological background of the concept and its various explanations and characteristics. Good governance, one of the most expected aspects throughout the world, is also deliberated in this model. In the later part of the model, we prepared a preparatory understanding of governance in India by discussing the role of various state and non-state actors in the governance process. Thank you.